Today's lesson focuses on the theme of death in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And remember, we need to refer to the Grizz Grimley version of Frankenstein. Throughout the history of civilization, humans have been obsessed with the idea of overcoming death. They are hyper aware of our shortcomings, our life expectancy, our ability to get ill, our ability to get injured. And many stories in our literary tradition centre around the idea of reversing or overcoming this. In the ancient story of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which dates around 2000 years BC, Gilgamesh was a Sumerian king of Uruk, which is modern day Iraq, and journeyed to the underworld in an attempt to discover the secret of immortality after the death of his closest friend, Enkidu. This is what we can see in the image. And when we start to look for them, we notice how prevalent these stories are. Entangled on the top left, we have Rapunzel's magic hair, and her fake mother adopts her so that she can overcome her aging. In Wolverine, we have the overcoming of our physical limitations, the ability to heal ourselves. In Lord of the Rings, we have the ring which gives us power. We have many characters making a decision between taking this power or accepting their own mortality. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is, of course, one of the Deathly Hallows, and it allows the holder to overcome death. Darth Vader's character is based on the fact that he is terrified of death. He tries to overcome death because he's scared everyone around him is dying. And the Deathly Hallows story on the bottom right-hand side is taken from Harry Potter. And here we have three different methods of evading death. The Elder Wand, which allows us to kill other wizards that try to kill us. The Cloak of Invisibility, which allows us to hide from death. And, of course, the Philosopher's Stone, which allows us to raise people from the dead. And this story is a bit of an allegory. It has a message and a moral. In the animation of the Deathly Hallows, which I definitely recommend Googling or just looking on YouTube and watching that. It's only a few minute clip. We see what happens to each of these characters when they try to evade death. And in the end, only the man who faces up to his death is able to live a happy life. So we're really reflecting on these questions today. Why do we think human beings are so obsessed with defeating death? And what might be the consequences for humanity if death is defeated by science? Now we're going to look at a few panels in chapter 1 of Grizz Grimley's version of Frankenstein. The very first page of Frankenstein's story focuses on society and Frankenstein being raised in an environment of privilege and public service. You might wish to open your book to page 14 to look closely at the panel. We have this lexical field: honour, reputation, respected. The diction links life purpose with receiving accolades and prizes. It links with Frankenstein's desire to be a benefactor of humanity and to gain glory for conquering death. It shows the importance high society places on reputation and also explains why Frankenstein keeps his failure and the monster's existence a secret. In the second quote, we have the word indefatigable, meaning inexhaustible, defining life as an endless quest to serve others tirelessly. This becomes ironic in the context of Frankenstein's increasing isolation from others due to his shame and sense of failure. Artistically, we have the Geneva sign, which is in a theme park style. Grimley associates society with the winning of prizes for public service, and we can see this in the call out below. When we apply the graphic lens, we have the medals pulled out. We're really focusing on those medals that Frankenstein's father wears and define his identity through the prizes he has gained. Note that there's the trademark Grimley skull inside one medal. All of these prizes cannot stop death. It doesn't matter how many accolades he has, he is still mortal. As we progress through the chapter, this one is on page 16, we see the effect of loss on Elizabeth, and it really foreshadows Shelley's concern with the psychological impact of loss in the novel as a whole. Now, contextually, we remember the great impact loss had on Shelley herself, who had many miscarriages and many stillbirths. We've got leaving her an orphan and a beggar. The diction orphan and beggar convey dependence and isolation. The last blow came over her. The metaphor last blow emphasizes the feeling of loss is so strong it can be physically painful. And my father came like a protecting spirit. The simile, like a protecting spirit, stresses the healing effect of care and compassion in a time of need. We get the sense that Shelley felt extremely isolated and that she needed some care and attention to help her through her grief. Remember, the place where they are writing the novel in the novel competition is very isolated. They don't have technology there, of course, so they are lonely, and it is a very ominous kind of gothic setting. So those feelings of isolation might be increased. Applying the graphic lens, we have the symbolism of the coffin in the foreground, which creates graphic weight, meaning the page is heavy. We can feel the weight of her loss. This draws attention to the impact of bereavement on Caroline. The image overlaps the background of Frankenstein's father in silhouette. The open door reflects a way out of grief through care and compassion. It's as if he's entering to save her. Applying the artistic lens, we've got these sepia tones of the palette, which reflect the loss of colour in a world filled with death and grief, the dominant colours of the entire graphic novel. It's a very muted colour palette, mostly browns, some yellows. It gives it the sense that it's aging and old, but also we have the heaviness, the loneliness, and the isolation. Now turn to page 22. Again, you may like to look at this in your book so you can see it clearly. Frankenstein's dream of conquering death is born out of his lack of formal education and his reading of the famous alchemists like Albertus Magnus. He says, "My dreams were therefore undisturbed by reality." There's a juxtaposition here of dream and reality, and it really emphasizes the fact that Frankenstein's ambitions are a product of his ignorance. He doesn't know the limits of science, so he thinks anything is possible, and there are clear links here to romantic heroes. The Philosopher's Stone and the Elixir of Life. This is an allusion to the ambitions of the alchemist's bases, Frankenstein's pursuit of immortality on the fantastical. The Philosopher's Stone, the Elixir of Life, these are all legendary antidotes to humans' mortality. So the Philosopher's Stone, exactly like in Harry Potter, is a stone that gives the bearer the ability to raise people from the dead. And the Elixir of Life is like a potion which keeps people alive. It's a potion of vitality. What glory would attend the discovery if I could render man invulnerable to all but a violent death? The diction glory highlights Frankenstein's desire for accolades. He's saying in this line, if I could find the antidote, the solution to death, if I could find a way to keep people alive, what glory would I get? What prizes would I get? Wouldn't that be the best invention, and wouldn't I be respected for it? Artistically, the text is superimposed on scientific drawings of body parts. Grimly suggests Frankenstein's dreams of conquering death exist within a context of dismemberment and reduction of life to diagrams and labels. These images are very similar to the Leonardo da Vinci style of drawing. Again, this idea of a romantic hero, someone who is isolated, whose plans only make sense to themselves. This is like a field notebook. A field notebook is a notebook you take with you on a field trip or an expedition. It's a real sense of adventure. On page 23, perhaps the most important message in the entire novel, that of the blasted tree after it is struck by lightning. Violent and terrible thunderstorm, frightful loudness, curiosity, and delight. Lightning is associated with God's wrath, emphasized by the adjectives violent, terrible, and frightful. This is really suggesting the power of nature. Frankenstein's disconnect is emphasized by the juxtaposition of frightful with his delight. When something scary happens, he finds it delightful, exciting. The possibility of the power is maddening to him. The dazzling light vanished. Nothing remained but a blasted stump. This image sums up Frankenstein's story, as he is blinded by the light of discovery and the potential of lightning to conquer death. He ends blasted by the consequences of his hubris meaning ambition. Graphically, we have the contrast of a splash panel showing Frankenstein's curiosity and delight, with framed panel showing the destroyed tree. This visually illustrates the consequences of curiosity with destructive natural forces. Page 26. The death of Frankenstein's mother allows Shelley, whose own mother died in childbirth, to continue to develop her exploration of loss and its impact on identity. The feelings of those whose dearest ties are rent. The metaphor rent defines tearing, reflecting how losing a loved one feels like being the victim of physical violence, being ripped away. It definitely creates an image of childbirth, and a violent childbirth. When women die in childbirth, it's often because of loss of blood. So we get the image created that her own birth was violent and she was ripped from her mother. At the same time, her mother was ripped from life. The void that presents itself to the soul. This is a metaphor for the terrible sense of absence that accompanies loss. Artistic, which also could be graphic, we have the black negative space, which reflects absence and desolation. The use of black negative space increases in the graphic novel as we progress through the chapters. Graphically, we have the use of line to depict Frankenstein's grim, downturned mouth and rigid posture. These reflect his psychological deterioration in the wake of his mother's death. He feels numb, he feels rigid, he doesn't feel human. Today I'd like you to choose another panel from chapter 1. You need to identify and unpack how two language features shape Shelley's meaning, and identify how one artistic or graphic feature Grimley uses adds to Mary Shelley's meaning. Add your slide in chronological order with everyone else's to this Google Slides. Ideally, you should add 2 slides, just as you've seen in this video. The first should have the panel with 2 quotes and the language techniques unpacked. The second, the graphic and artistic features annotated.